Alright, we are starting off in a really bad state with these giant Monstera logs. When I first got them, I didn't have any time to prep them and I had to go on a 2-week vacation, so I threw them in a bucket of water with an air stone hoping they would be fine, but here we are with that aftermath. As you can see, there is some severe rot on all of these cuttings and a lot of the flesh is just like sloughing off. It's actually pretty disgusting feeling. It's just like unsettling the way it just like slops off like some sort of like pudding or jello. But again, they are doing really bad. I probably should have changed the water, but again, I was gone for 2 weeks. There was really nothing I could do but leave them, come back, and see this nightmare. This footage is going to go over an entire 2 years, which is absolutely wild. This is around New Year's in 2023, and we're almost at New Year's here in 2025. So I think we're only like a month and a half out from there. So about 2 years. Once I had them cleaned up, I did want to try a few different methods. With the big giant leaf, since there was only like 1 or 2 nodes on there, I didn't really know where to put this thing because it doesn't fit in anything. So I tried to wrap a bag of sphagnum moss around it, hoping to keep just the moisture around the actual nodes and encourage some roots and just hope for the best. One of the other very large ones, I wanted to try in a giant bucket full of some sort of airy medium. After seeing the water totally fail, I gave up on that altogether. Maybe I should have kept one in there and just kept the water clean over time, but I was kind of spooked by how much rot it caused so quickly. So anyways, I put it in a big bin of cocoa chips, some orchid bark, some giant perlite, and I wanted to see how it would do in there. The other 3 I just left on the floor for like another week until I figured out I could just chuck them in some big bins, and I literally just laid them on top of plants. I didn't have like any substrate or anything, just to see what they would happen, like what they would do in an actual humid environment. So skipping ahead about 5 months, there is a little short one that you didn't see in the initial footage that actually activated quite quickly. This one was just sitting in a bin. I believe I put this one in the bin that was in like the previous video that I already had released like 2 weeks ago. So you can get an idea of what that was in. That was a sphagnum moss perlite bin, and that always seems to work so well for me. The next bin was just a large IKEA bin with a whole bunch of like dead anthuriums in there. I just chucked these in here because I didn't know what else to really do with these things, and I didn't have a lot of time to dedicate to them. But you can see they are sprouting in here, and it's pretty cool because they're not really sitting on top of any medium. They're just sort of suspended in a very humid environment. But we did have some growth with 2 leaves, which is pretty quick, I guess, but nothing too spectacular, and there is quite a bit of rot on the ends. Now, the very massive one that was in the bucket was not doing well in that bucket, and so I took it out. I could almost smell how like anaerobic it got in there, and I think I put too much water in. There was no drainage. It was just a disaster. So I saw the other ones working in the propagation bin, so I just chucked this one in a different bin and threw some of the like cocoa coir on top of it, and you can see it's not doing the greatest here. The ends are starting to rot, and just I really set this one up for disaster, but I guess what can you do? So I am going to chop this one up, see what's like going on inside, and see if we can save some of the pieces. This stuff is super thick, so even a razor blade wasn't quite enough to cut it, so I did use an actual hacksaw. It did the trick. Normally I don't really mess with rot because I've seen plenty of times, and even in my previous videos you'll see that the rot sort of just stops. The plant sprouts, everything looks good. However, this one has such a significant amount and it just hasn't done well. I want to try and get rid of most of it before it travels like up that like plant, whatever, a vascular system, whatever you want to call it. So I did chop the 2 ends off to where I thought it was pretty healthy, and that left us with another good piece to start off with and put it back in a propagation bin. And hopefully this one has a much better start as time goes on, because I can see some activation. So I think just getting rid of that actual mold, or not mold, the rot, and then letting it do its thing should be all it needs. I did put that one back in the bin that you saw in the previous video, so at the end I'll kind of show you an update on what it looked like. So about 2 more months has passed, and we're going to look at the one that we had the terrible rot with that we trimmed and stuck it in the one like better bin. And you can see right off the bat the rot has not spread much since I cut it. Just the ends have a little bit, which I always expect to see. Nothing freaking me out because it's not moving very quickly, because again, it's been about 2 months. Going back to the humid bin that isn't really wet, we can pull all the pieces out of here, and you can already see from far away that the 2 months hasn't played a very big role in how they look, and they pretty much look the same. There is some more leaf growth on the really long one, and none of them seem to be rotting too much, and in fact they look like they're dehydrating a little bit. So it's definitely not too humid in there where we're seeing tons of rot, and it's almost like things are just callousing over. So they are sustaining, but they aren't really growing, so I'm gonna have to pay more attention to them and like get them wet, spray them, and do a little bit more to keep it a little more wet in there, because I don't want these things to dehydrate before they start growing and getting roots. All right, now we are taking a time machine almost into like the scene of Avatar, and we are at the almost full 2-year mark of these nodes, and you can see there is quite a bit of growth in that one bin. You can really see what about a 1.5 years of total neglect looks like on a plant, and it just looks, I think it actually kind of looks cool because all the roots have come out. They've gone into these like tiny little pots and they all hang like floating islands from this thing. I think the look is pretty interesting. However, it's quite comical in the sense that like, what am I even doing at this point? But nonetheless, the plants are pretty healthy. Once they were able to root into that dirt, they were able to get a lot more moisture and grow a lot quicker. So things are doing well. But you can see we don't have any insane rot. The stick is pretty like woody at this point. The other one, you can see some of the layers have sort of peeled away and stuff. But for the most part, everything is really healthy and doing well. Here's another great example of why you need to act when things are doing well. If you remember, there was a really early short stump that had a lot of like potential great growth. Here it is now because I didn't ever pot it up, and it must not have gotten water in the propagation bin it was in. It just flat out dried up and died. And so it kind of sucks because you saw 2 activated things at one point in time, and I'm sure it had beautiful leaves, and I just never did anything with it, and here's what it looks like. I know a lot of you had been asking for an update on those giant logs for a long time now, so hopefully you're satisfied with that 2-year result. Maybe not, because you saw me basically abuse plants, but at least you get to see a perspective of what these kind of look like when you just give them a lot of time and not a lot of attention. It still was an interesting turnout, and I still need to pot these things up, so maybe there will be more updates in the future, or maybe they'll just be husks.